coming over here. And it's actually, the situation is getting worse. You know, there's these trains coming all the way from Central America where they're very young kids coming over here, and they're dying in their way across. So that's what that's about. And so that's the water reflecting the blood of all of the ones that have
And
that.
the color red, of course.
Yeah, so, yeah, pretty
blood.
much the blood, yeah, yeah. This is the same stories. It's the fall of the angel, La Caída del Ángel, and this boy has just died, and he has just gotten to heaven, but he doesn't know that, and he's probably was in some war somewhere, or maybe coming across the border, and so he is in a beautiful place, but he's just waking up into heaven, so he doesn't know it yet. These two pieces are, the one on the left is Muerte la Frontera, or Death at the Border, the same thing. And then there's the young boys crying dollar bills. And so many times, you know, the deaths are occurring because of work, and work that is very difficult, very hard, and they don't get paid a lot. So it's just painful to know and to see. And this this piece on the right-hand side is, I was just wanting to do a piece about beauty, and a friend of mine's daughter posed for me. And actually, what I really wanted to do, because I saw her dress, and the dress was like really transparent, the sleeves, and so that's really what I wanted to paint. And the rest really was an excuse to do those sleeves transparent so I could make it look like it. So I just had a lot of fun doing that. I mean, sometimes I do paint about beauty, and lately more than before. The piece on the left is called A Circus in My Head, and it's also a piece about immigration where the young boy is coming over, and there's all these figures. There's a contortionist, there's a man in the trapeze, and there's a guy on top of his head in a bike. They're all like going, moving, doing things. As you know, like when you're an immigrant, many times you have to become a clown to be able to survive or do whatever you need to do. But it can be, you know, presented within beauty and within hope, because I do have hope, because it's not always the end, it's not always death, and there's a lot of solidarity that occurs, and that's that one. Then the one in the right-hand side is a piece that I did for a show that just is still on at the Esperanza Peace and Justice Center, and it's an exhibit about Gloria Saldúa. That is a very important Chicana writer that spoke about the border, and she wrote a book called Borderlands, and is an incredible writer. And so the girl here is being transformed, and she's holding on to the savila that is, I don't know how you say savila in English, but it's like a sacred plant. And then the butterfly wings are the fact that she's being transformed, and the snake is a very important symbol for this writer, and so was the lizard. So all those are the components for that. And this is the last piece. It's called The Announcement, or El Anuncio. Many times when people come here, and this is kind of they're daughters of immigrants that are here, and they're left, and the parents leave, or the father or the mother leave, and they're left behind, and so they're coming to announce that maybe that shouldn't be the way that things are, and maybe they shouldn't leave, and maybe they should stay, and it is really beautiful, and maybe things should be done a different way. So that's the announcement that they're coming to make.
Thank you, Liliana.
Thank you.
And I'd like to invite all the artists to come take their seats at the table.
Well, I'll go ahead and take a stab at it. I've been, I think partly because I'm working with watercolor, drawn to sort of liquid subjects, and also my interest in environmentalism leads me to, can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Leads me to imagery dealing with water, because that's so much a part of the environmental conversation.
Anybody else? Justin, you've done a number of things with water. Why, though? I mean, what got you interested in it in the first place? What drew you to the Mississippi River in the first place, for example?
Well, what did draw me to the Mississippi was just the importance of it in the United States, primarily as this amazing route before sort of highways and route of transformation from the north to the south, and this sort of this quirkiness of the Mississippi as well. This sort of I went to the headwaters because there's you can't specifically say like this is where it starts because it's this sort of melting glaciers, fill lake to another lake to another lake. But I mean, there's the Mississippi there starts at like 2 feet wide, you know, and it sort of moves out of Lake Itasca, and it's very vital and sort of energetic, and so much different than the Mississippi I've known at the south, which was, you know, a mile wide and just brown and like really slow. So I wanted to capture part of the Mississippi that was dealing with energy and the beginning of something, the start of a cycle or the start of the transformation. And so that's what sort of draw me to it. And it's just, certainly it's cultural and political and societal significance within the United States.
Yes, Liliana.
I grew up by the Pacific Ocean, so a lot of my work really deals with water, and I also like the color of water and the reflection of it. And then in the piece that is here at the show, of course I use water because I was trying to symbolize the blood of the people that have died coming, but basically I was really also concentrated in the reflection in the water.
Ansen?
I've always been interested in Taoism, Chinese philosophy, and one of the major symbols of Taoism is water. The fact that it's the softest thing, and yet it can eat away at mountains, and given enough time, you know, it can create the landscape. So I like those conundrums or ways of having something that's colorless and odorless, and yet so vital to everything that we do and that we are.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Will any of you continue to explore the water theme, or are there other interests now catching your attention? I know you've given us hints of that, but
I'm starting to work on ice.
frozen water. What are you doing with that in those works?
I'm working on a series based on ice cores, which are scientists are studying the past. Really, they're sort of like tree rings. They go to the glaciers and Antarctica, frozen continents, and take these core samples from miles and miles deep in the ice, and they bring up these tubes of ice and they analyze them and study them, and they can tell the weather patterns over just thousands and thousands of years are just incredible. And you know, visually there's not a whole lot there, so it's kind of challenging to figure out how to work with this in an engaging visual ways, but that's what I'm working on.
Mm-hmm.
So it is still water, but it's very old frozen water.
So what have others of you chosen as your next challenge? Ansen, Liliana? Yeah.
The last piece, one of the pieces that I showed, and that's what I'm working right now, I'm combining circus and water. Like that piece that I show of the young boy crossing, and it was yellow water, but it was just mainly, because water to me has a lot to do with borders and going into journeys, so that's how I'm using it, and I'm combining the circus and the water together.
Mm-hmm. Ansen or Justin, what are you working on next?
Following on my Luminaria piece, I'm going to start experimenting with photographic imagery on glass. And so hopefully I can create an even glossier, waterier image on glass.
And Justin?
I'm working on a new sound performance piece that's part of a Hills Snyder's curating a show based on with 4 artists at Blue Star.
For Contemporary Art Month?
Contemporary Art Month, that's in July. So I'm working on a new sound piece that deals with fence border, and it's based off the screenplay or the book, which was an Edward Abbey book called Brave Cowboy, and Lonely Are the Brave was the movie. So there's a sound piece where I'm running a signal through the fence, through the wire on the fence, and then recording that sound's being microphoned, and then so it's a long sort of feedback piece of sound being pushed through the fence, and it sort of very similar to Alma Lucier's music along a long thin wire, but it's more sort of, it deals specifically with this idea of a boundary and a barrier, and then at the end of the performance, the barrier gets cut.
Now, I should let everyone know that I have not told the panelists in advance what I'm asking of them, so these are all very impromptu answers, which I think makes for a livelier discussion. So this next question may be tough, maybe not, but let's see. Do you think an artist, through their art, can make a real difference? How do you think your vision affects viewers? Yes, Liliana.
I definitely think that an artist can make a difference. I had, in that exhibit that I spoke about, the Esperanza Peace and Justice Center, I had one of the artists, actually the person that was curating the show, Anel Flores. She must be probably about 20 years younger than I am, and then she wrote me an email because I was thanking her for her work, and she told me that when she was 15, she saw my work and she was really inspired, and she's been doing her work. She's doing great artwork, so that's just on that. And also, you also let people know what things that happen, and so I think that definitely I would hope that it can make a difference to at least some people.
Do others of you ever think about that?
Sometimes when I'm doing my work, you know, I'll get the thought in my mind, this is crazy. Why am I doing this? It's absolutely, you know, nobody in their right mind would do this. And I think all artists have this sort of self-doubt, you know. But then the thing that kind of snaps me out of it and brings me back is, you know, I would hope that if somebody would look at my work and get the kind of wonder that I feel when I create the work, and that sort of brings us back into the humanness of ourselves. You know, we're so caught up in the Wall Street Journal and, you know, what's happening on Wall Street and politics and all of that, and you know, just to come back to beauty and to nature and to water and to our basic elements. I think, you know, maybe that's what it's all about.
Anyone else? Put you on the spot, but let's hear. Well, I certainly think, I would feel hypocritical if I had said that I think that art could make a difference, because I think I'm motivated a lot by asking myself that question, like what could art do? I mean, it's sort of a question I'm constantly sort of asking myself if I'm in the studio. And, I sort of lost my train of thought, I apologize. But because I guess, especially since the work I've been working on most recently with that sort of faith, hope, and love, and this sort of Americana, there's been so much this ability to sort of go back and investigate history and participate with it in a way that I feel is very liberating, and I hope that at some point that idea of being able to participate in some sort of history or kind of go back and collaborate with it in a way and bring it forward and make it your own is something that I really relish and enjoy, and I hope that it's in some small way comes through in the work, and that at least on a very basic level, I mean, as you kind of asked, like, what is the audience thinking? I'm not 100% sure about that, but I hope that maybe at least on a very small level that you can see that there's a play with a lot of influences and sources, and that I'm very free and sort of open with those things, and then maybe that's a good place to start.
Mm-hmm. And Liz?
Well, I'll just start by saying that, you know, art is ultimately completely useless. However, that doesn't mean it's worthless, or, you know, it's an important, vital human pursuit. And when you're working with environmental themes, there's always the question of, is that going to help anything? And probably not as much as activism, but it is a way of bearing witness and of bringing information to different audiences, and but information in a different kind of package that has a different impact on an audience or a viewer, hopefully one that is perhaps more profound and has some kind of emotional resonance. So in that sense, it's certainly worthwhile, and, you know, we're all basically devoting our lives to it. Obviously, we think that it is, but useful, I don't know.
Well, I think you all gave excellent answers. Now I'd like to invite the audience to ask some questions. And Katie, do you have the microphone? Since we are recording this, we appreciate you using the mic. So, yes, Chris Souter.
I have a question for Liz. You use watercolor as your main medium, and it makes total sense as your work deals quite a bit with water. And you've also used natural stones to help you create the imagery. And so I was kind of curious as to why you saw the need to make oil paintings. Because the imagery that you chose to make didn't seem to have anything at all to do with linseed oil.
Well, you're right, I didn't, but I don't think that the material that you use has to be dictated by your subject matter. And oil paint is an incredibly versatile medium, a lot more than watercolor. And for the visual effects that I wanted with those pieces, they just could not be achieved with watercolor. For example, and this wasn't apparent in the reproductions, but they have relief to them. They have a physical surface quality, and they just have a different kind of physical presence than the works on paper, which, you know, as you mentioned, is my primary medium, works on paper, primarily watercolor. But there's sometimes an idea will call for another material, and those pieces, for me, did.
Another question from the audience. Penelope, you've got the mic there. Great.
Thank you. This question is for Justin. And Justin, this is more kind of a stream of consciousness observation that I thought about when I was viewing your series of images. And to fit in with David's question earlier about does art have an impact, it certainly has an impact on me, each of your work and all art that I ever see. Because to me, it's like, you know, we've got this big puzzle out here, and then you can put these little pieces, you know, that your awareness is created by viewing a different artist's perspective on the world. And it's always fascinating to me that, you know, it's always different and beautiful. So, leading to that, I noticed there was a connection I made with your imagery, organic imagery with the plant. Like you used the Confederate jasmine, which when I first viewed your piece, I was like, what is that doing there? You know, like why is that there? That puzzled me. I had to, you know, really look at it. And I don't really know why, but I mean, I did come to, so when I saw your bigger presentation, you had lettervine, a print, and so, and then I started viewing the way these paintings, or the, you know, the visual imagery of the writing, the text. And so it seemed to have a very organic flow. And then I started thinking of the sound waves, and wondering if that was a conscious thing on your part, the relationship between the sound waves and the organic forms.
Well, and just to sort of feedback, I think your first point, what you were saying, is really important too. And I'm always so interested in, like, the artists I'm most interested in are those people who can sort of synthesize different interests and kind of put them together in such an interesting way. And I find that to be where I draw a lot of my inspiration. So I feel very much kinship with what you're saying there, the first part. But the jasmine, I'll address that first. It was about the life cycle, and there were the shapes of the topiary essentially was in a Mobius strip, and so it was sort of this twist, you know, of this sort of infinite twist, and I really liked that idea. And through that show, there was basically the sculptures and print sort of created this landscape, and I really wanted to have something living, sort of some part of something living in that show. And so that I had grown over a series of several months, that I'd worked those vines, the Confederate jasmine, into those sort of Mobius strips, those twisting sort of topiaries there, and so there'd be a living element during the show. And I hadn't really made the connection between those and the sort of letter vines, but when I was doing that, I was definitely working on those pieces. I worked on I'd worked on a lot of the audio first because it was sort of instantly like certain things as people were writing letters. I mean, like you would hear this sort of sound, and you get these really interesting the way people would tap, and this is the way they worked with the sound, or the way they wrote was automatically there as you were sort of listening to it. And so I started working with the sound first because I knew what to do with it. And then as I started getting the letters together, I was listening to some of these sounds, and some of it was just that shape and that loop. And so the letter vinyl was just specific letter forms that really worked themselves together formally really quite beautifully. And it just felt, at the very bottom of that, it's a mark out, like someone's erasure. And I thought it's very interesting to sort of start to build something from a mistake, essentially. So like, let's make that the root of this, and then let's sort of, or the soil, and let's build everything up from that. And so I like that connection. I hadn't made that one between the two, but I was listening to the sound while I was making those. Sure.
Another question? Yes, up in the front, Jamie.
Hi, I have a two-part question for Ansen. First is, do you have any kind of inkling of what your images are going to look like before you press the button? I mean, probably with the river you do more than some of the other stuff, but like say your models in the studio or people in crowds. And the second part is you've worked with people in crowds outside, and you've worked with people in the studio. You worked with water outside. Have you considered playing with water or fluids in the studio or colored liquids?
That's an interesting question. I hadn't considered doing water in the studio, but you'll be getting your royalty check. I get asked that the first part of your question a lot. Do I know what's going to happen? And like Justin, a lot of it is a mistake, and the most interesting things are the mistakes. What I've learned through working with the camera and the process is how to put myself in the right place at the right time with the right conditions to sort of maximize my yield from the camera. But really the best part of it is setting up the situation and then seeing what you really get, because we're not able to perceive the reality that the camera is perceiving, and that's not really so bizarre, because think about a telescope. That's observing another reality that we're not privy to except through the machine. A microscope is the same way. So this is just another way maybe to see time and movement together.
Any more questions? Yes.
I'm wondering, in your artwork, how you see your work as far as political expression. I want to use a cinematographic example. In 1930 and 1940s Germany, there was a filmmaker who made a lot of movies. Maybe you remember her, glorifying the Nazi Party.